This is Philanthropic Ghost, and we're live on the air, Matt and Theis, for the first time. And we're glad to have you on the program. How are you feeling tonight? Or this morning, depends on where you are.
It is 3 p.m. where I am at. I'm feeling good. Thank you. I've been looking forward to meeting you and having this conversation today.
Well, thank you. And we do have to mention Newsly. They are a sponsor. Our podcast is on Newsly, where you can stop scrolling and start listening. Use coupon code GHOST2021 to get 1 month free premium subscription. As I said, we will be on Newsly later tonight, and they're a great app you can get in iOS store or Android, and check that out. They are a supporter of the podcast, so we'd like everybody to check it out on Newsly if you want to listen to the audio version of what we're going to talk about tonight. So one of the first things I always talk to people about is how did you actually get into like social media or get your kind of name out there, or what you're doing? Like, where did you start that you can remember?
Ooh, that's a good question. So I'm currently in the process of getting help with my social media. So I haven't been too actively involved, but I would say I started I'm with the coaching business that I'm kind of like promoting and working in right now. I started with my website. That was my first internet presence. And then from there, I used YouTube because I had recorded some ambience recordings in Hawaii, and I made some videos to just have people be able to listen to oceans, waves, and sunset and sunrise and these things. So YouTube was probably one of the early places where I started.
So were you always a musician at the beginning? Is that what you started with?
Yes, I would say everything starts with music in my life, pretty much, and I hope it continues. It's been a little calmer, not as much creative output, not as many songs, but I'm looking forward to buy a ukulele here while I'm in Hawaii and to start playing again.
You're learning that? You're learning the ukulele?
Yeah, it's kind of like I've been playing it a while now, but I don't own one. So every time a friend comes over, I'll play with his and enjoy playing, but I didn't have my own.
I always ask musicians, one of the things, I know that's not the primary thing you're into now, but like, when do you remember that you got into music? Just for a little background. What year or age do you remember being into?
So I went to early musical school development, something like a pre-kindergarten music development where kids get to play with music and learn about it. So that's my first memory of music. And then after that, my memories, I would say, start with learning to play the keyboard. And I was probably around 6, 7 at the time.
Mm-hmm. So you were like an organist or like a synthesist or a piano player? What type of keyboard?
Just I would say a keyboarder, so I didn't learn to play a dynamic left hand, so I played chords with my left hand and played melodies with my right. And I think I was too lazy at the time that I didn't practice enough for it to be able to develop into something sophisticated. So whenever we started something more difficult with the left hand, I was just like not prepared enough. But it helped me, later when I started to play the guitar, the playing fashion is pretty similar. I'm not a melodic guitarist, so I play chords with my left hand, which is kind of like the same as with the keyboard, So I would say I'm a rhythm guitarist and keyboarder. And when I played in a reggae band, I played a synthesizer. I played melodies. So that was coming in again.
That's interesting. I started on clarinet and then I went to keyboard because I needed a writing instrument. Not that you can't write on the clarinet, but really like songs are written on a guitar or a keyboard. Yeah, and I like the fact that a keyboard could build the whole thing. That's been my kind of claim to fame. Is like, okay, when you become a synthesist, then you actually try to mimic a bass, mimic a violin, mimic the breath on a sax, and actually don't Yeah, that's the whole thing. But I'll go too far with that. So I'll get to one of the questions that you had on your on the website that we found you is to ask you like what is a totem animal, so you maybe can explain to people what that is.
Yeah, so it's basically our potential or our self showing up as an animal form, or in an animal form. So a totem animal is for me. I found my main totem animal is a panther, for example, and I'll just say that because it's easier to relate to. And so when I look at a leopard, for example, how it lives, how it hunts, how it eats, how it sleeps, how it's kind of like dealing with enemies. And we're talking about, I mean, this is a great gap from talking about music, but it helps me to see where my challenges are and how that animal deals with certain things. And it's a little bit like a zodiac sign, maybe. We see certain elements that help us, and that's where we resonate with certain aspects of our character or our inner qualities, and other aspects maybe we don't see so much or don't relate to as much. And the same is true with the totem animal. It just helps us to grow into our potential and to develop into into our full potential in that sense.
Well, I'm a part Blackfoot and Cherokee, and in my family, there was a lot of affinity toward nature, and also kind of a similar concept to the totem animal, just spirit animals.
Yeah.
Eagles, like very big in indigenous culture,
Yeah.
and Blackfoot culture, like the bald eagle, any kind of eagle, hawks, and a lot of birds have different aspects within spirit, spirit animals. But yeah, I was always drawn into the woods. I was a kid. I was a mountain biker, and I loved going in the woods and actually kind of communing. And I found that I could actually, I don't know if it was the Blackfoot in me, but if I found a deer, I could actually be so quiet they would come up to me and I could like pet them. Like
Wow.
I could talk to beavers. I could talk
Yeah.
animals could come to me and they wouldn't get scared. And I don't know if I was kind of channeling my kind of indigenous past, or like realizing I could channel it, realizing I could feel it. Because I had talked to my grandparents, my great grandparents who were, indigenous from Cherokee or Blackfoot, and I felt what they were telling me. And then when I went out in the woods, I kind of felt like, well, okay, I need to kind of listen to Gaia. I need to listen to nature, and then not try to just, do my human thing of like trying to control everything, and kind of listen to what's going on, which I think is maybe kind of what you're talking about with like totem animals. You can kind of feel that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've never been in the presence of a leopard, for example, like in the wild. I saw one in the zoo, but from hearing what you say, that's a great gift, to bring ourselves so much down to be able to connect with nature, and that animals are approaching and that you can communicate with them. That's special. Everybody has that, but it's a special treat, in that sense, to be able to connect with that.
Yeah, I think it just makes you understand that, like, the earth is as important. It's like, it's not something you're trying to just, oh, I can just leave. And I don't have to care about Gaia. I don't have to care about you should like understand the connection, that everything's important. Like the ant is important,
Yeah.
the stream is important. You just don't pollute it just because you feel like you can to make a profit. But I think I'll go a different direction. But so one of the other questions you had is like why you're in Hawaii, because you have a vision, and you wanted to have a sanctuary, and Hawaii is, why did you feel that that's a good place to be? Because that's where you are right now, right?
That is where I'm at right now, and it's been a question that has been going around in my head for quite some time, and between my head and my heart. And I went to different places. I went to the Canary Islands because that was much closer to Germany, where I'm originally from, and where it's a little bit similar geography. Sorry, and so I've been looking in and listening into places, and the reason why I feel the vision, the first intentional vision was of Hawaii or Jamaica, one of those two, because I have a really strong relationship through the reggae music to Jamaica as well. But when I came here for the second time in 2018, it just felt like the right place because the energy is just so healing in that sense. It is uncompromising in a sense, and I just experienced that again when I arrived 2 weeks ago, that there is just certain things in me that it brings up which are uncomfortable and where it is painful to go through that. But the overall experience is that it's very healing and very, very a good place to heal, and then to go back to the community and bring that back into the communities where we live, and to help others to go through similar things. And so the sanctuary is just meant to be a place where people can come and heal, even though it is very far away. I always saw it as a place where people can just come without it being a special retreat or something luxury where you need a lot of money to be able to come, but more like for every people, for all the people in that sense. That is the fast answer to that question.
So this is like your primary location for light trails, your practice? Is this like or is it still like located in Germany? Or is it?
No, the practice is located in Germany, and I'm not as much in Hawaii as I would like it to be, but it's still more time than most people get to spend here. At least from the point of view of all the people I speak with in Germany and my clients. So the practice is based in Germany, and I will probably split the time between Germany, Norway, and Hawaii. My passport is running out next year, and I need to apply for a new visa. So I will probably get a working permit in that sense, that I get to stay in Hawaii and offer workshops and be legally here and offer stuff so people can participate and benefit from
Well,
me
that
being
does
here.
sound like a good sanctuary, because Hawaii is that is a destination that a lot of people would be very happy to go to, and then to have your light trail is incorporating that into that location. That's pretty fantastic. Norway, I mean, I've talked to a lot of musicians from Norway. I've always wanted to go there because of the type of music I do. There seems to be an affinity for electronic music in that location, and also Germany, like Berlin, Brian Eno, Bowen. That's always been like, oh, I need to go to Berlin. I want to go to Norway. I want to go to Iceland.
Yeah.
Those are places I want to go. And I actually did talk to a producer in Hawaii last year who was in one of my bedroom producer festivals. Who was a member of one. I do these concerts. I got introduced to that kind of Hawaiian culture through that connection I had. But yeah, it is something. My brother did live in Hawaii when he worked for the Navy. And I did get to travel there one time to visit him, but I really haven't been there a lot. So yeah, I know it's fantastic from what I remember. but so maybe we could talk more about light trails so people can know what you're doing with it. Your coaching practice.
Yeah. So basically, I created a program. It took a little time for me to develop that. I started this practice some years ago, but it didn't really go anywhere. And then I made some music in between and got back to the coaching practice again last year. And so what I do is I work with shamanic journeys. That's related to the question that you asked with the totem animal or spirit animal, where we journey from this ordinary reality that we are connecting in and talking in right now, that this reality where other people say that's the only reality, and then we travel into non-ordinary reality, the place where we go to sleep and dream, or when we have some kind of maybe ayahuasca trips or anything where it is different, but it's still kind of like coherent experiences. And these shamanic journeys, I work with my clients, and I have a program where we go from the first session to session 16, where people just get help in creating their dreams and creating their goals. It's not always done in 16 weeks, but at least they're much, much closer by the time they leave than they had been before we started, so that's the basic gist of it, doing shamanic journeys.
That's like from a shaman kind of point of view. So maybe people could understand like the role of a shaman and how you see it in your practice.
Yeah, can you explain or give me that question again, please?
Maybe you could explain to the audience the role of a shaman in your practice, like what
Okay.
what that role, how that, because people might know what a shaman is from their own
Yeah.
interpretation or somebody else's interpretation of it, but I kind of want to see how you view your role as a shaman.
That's a good question. So I see my role as the guide and the person who holds the space, who's kind of like making sure the person is held energetically. And then my definition of a shaman would be a person who is able to wander worlds and to wander time between time and space, kind of like, and that is all tied to that non-ordinary reality, right?
Mm-hmm.
So me having had so much experiences through my training and through my my experience in these shamanic journeys, I know a lot of the places where my clients are going, and so I'm able to help them go through it and to stand by. Usually I just, in simple terms, if somebody would look from the outside, they would just see me drumming while the other person is laying on the floor and having their eyes closed. But I'm helping the people to find their, or to kind of like find their way, in a sense. I'm just there, and then later, when we talk about what they experienced, I help them to, sometimes, if they need the help, sometimes they know perfectly well what they saw and what it meant, but sometimes they don't really know what it meant, what visions came up and what they saw. And so I help them to just see that, interpret it maybe, or give them my suggestion how I would see it, and they can feel if they resonate with my point of view or not, in that sense. So I'm basically a guide following along.
So like the non ordinary reality, or is it something that's like not linear, that like it's like some people think of things like they're very linear, it's very sequential, like things go from like left to right, but is it that we could go right to left, or it could go inside out, or go in between, or go out, outside in? Is it like very dynamic?
Yeah, so absolutely. I would say the beauty of non-ordinary reality is that it's non-linear. It is a holistic place where time and space are different, so we can actually journey into the future or journey into the past through certain things, help our, like me, for example, when I go into a traumatic situation that reveals itself that I want to heal, I go back into time and I help myself going through that. And I know that I went through that in that certain way because I had been there. So it's kind of like mind boggling stuff sometimes, but the non-sequentiality of it is a great aspect why it is so powerful, that we can do certain things that affect our reality and help us to make changes in our current situation that are just helping us in other ways than when we do it in this chronological time sequential way.
So in your practice, do you encourage people to kind of take diaries of their dreams, or like write it down, or just to try to speak it out from what they remember without writing it down? Is there any kind of thinking of taking a diary or a log?
Yeah, I encourage them to log it and to write it down. That the journey. Sometimes I look through my notes of journeys. I did a dream diary for a couple of years, but I stopped doing that. But when I look into these notes, it's always interesting to see what information was there that I missed at that time. So that's
You
a
go back
great.
and look at it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's great value in these notes.
that's
Same
kind of like
as yeah.
Well, one of the things I like to do is I like to just, when I record, I just put my multi-track on and I just do what I call a stream of consciousness rehearsal. and I kind of got it from like Frank Zappa and Neil Young, my heroes, is they used to say, well, we're just going to put the reel on and just play. And then we go back. And Zappa was famous for taking stuff from like concerts and wherever he was doing. And he'd come back to his house and they have pictures of him in his living room with all these reels. And he's just got his headphones on and he was taking stuff from live shows, from studio shows, and he would cut the tapes. He would just like cut them. It was very non-linear. He would just like, oh, I'll take this thing from this thing and this thing and like mix it up. And I've been very much a big proponent of stream of consciousness and kind of taking like random voltage and making an analog LFO like drive a drum beat, kind of chaotic, but have some strange, like, because it's like this unknown factor. Everybody's always trying to do something really so controlled today. So people try to have things that are so perfect. I like the happy accidents. I like the imperfections. That's what I like in music. I like fusion jazz, or like bebop, or somebody's going to go off and then come back. And you don't know all the time what they're going to do. And that to me is the whole journey in music, as I like that randomness that could happen.
Absolutely. And it's beautiful, whenever I get into that groove and I just play and I just sing certain things, and when it just grooves, when it's just flowing, without me knowing what's happening next, what words are coming out of my mouth, what melodies am I playing. It is beautiful, but it is so representative of the current moment that is fleeting. We can't grasp onto that, because the moment we grasp, it's over, right? So it's a very special place. Yeah.
Well, I try to do recording because then I get point in time stuff, and then I can actually, because I can sample it.
Yeah.
Then I can actually take that point in time and actually own it. Yeah. So the new tech is I can take point in time stream of consciousness, and then I can still replicate it with my multi-track. If I had to play that, maybe I couldn't actually play it, but I can multi-track it and then sing over it, and then maybe do a different line over it. So I mean, Trent Reznor and his guys do that. 9 Inch Nails, they do a lot of that. I was studying how they actually record, and they say, yeah, we did these random point in times, and we actually bring our reels and our multi-tracks on stage, and then we run them through effects to rip them up again. But we actually have them as the original master, and then we rip them up. And I'm like, yeah, that's brilliant. I was like, and I said, well, I'm going to do that. So I've been doing it for the last 10 years. But yeah, I just think nonlinear thinking is like where my head's at lately. Yeah, as an artist, when I was younger, I was always trying to clone something, and now I just let it go. I feel like the universe is going to tell any artist, like the muse talks to a poet, talks to any musician. We can channel it. That's part of the skill of a creator, is like I can take all those inputs within and without, and I can just get that groove. And people was like, well, you're like in a trance. Yeah, you come out of a concert, like you try to ask me what I was doing. It's like, I don't know. I just got into the groove and I don't even know what I was doing. But I think that's what it is. I mean, when you're a musician, you kind of get into it. You got the muscle memory, you got the skill, you've been playing 20 years. You just can do it. And if you try to describe it, it's hard to describe, because, I think that's when you're a mentor or something, you kind of know your groove for what you're trying to teach, right? You're trying to teach people, and maybe it's hard to describe exactly where your thoughts are coming from, but you know it, you own it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess there's a great, at least sometimes, a great trust in that things will work out, So if we look at this is maybe a trend, a transference, or something we can look at into life, from music into life, where we realize, because we practice that in the end we come out like fine. Maybe sometimes we're, at least I am sometimes stuck somewhere improvising, and it doesn't really go. But if we keep on going, keep on keeping on, then at some point it resolves itself, and then it goes back into a flow again.
It's kind of like the idea of like, do you start or stop because you missed something, or do you go with it? And it's kind of like in life. Do you let that mistake make you go all the way back to the beginning? Do you recover? And I've always tried to say, that's like a life lesson. Because I go on to these mentor web podcasts, and people say, well, how does music relate to my mentoring? Well, because if I'm a musician and I say like if you roll with your group and you don't go as oh we gotta stop the whole recording, go right back to the beginning. No, I'm gonna roll with what we did. We did a bad key change. We're gonna go with it. And that's kind of like life. Do you get totally thrown off track and then you don't know what to do and you just like you're just done? Like, oh, you gotta walk off stage because you made a mistake, or do you roll with it and keep on going?
Yeah.
Is a different philosophy as a point of view. Like, can you recover? Can you not recover?
Yeah, and there's a German hip hop band from my old days, and they had a line where it says, "We have to accept errors because life is a one take." It's just like we don't have another take. We have to accept that
Yeah, you
there's
have
an
to
error and
go
just
with it.
keep on going.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm a big proponent of that. I mean, I know that some people are going to make you go back and do it again if you're trying to score a film. The guy wants it to be X. It's like, okay, X has got to be that, so I got to do that. Okay, I get it. But if I'm doing something I want to do for myself, it's like maybe I'm not doing that.
yeah.
but so it's one other thing I was looking at was this the idea of a circular economy of supporting your sanctuary as well as local communities. Can you explain how that works in Hawaii? Does that also work in Germany, wherever you do it, or Norway? Is like that's your overall kind of circular economy approach? Maybe explain to people what that means.
Yeah, so the my basic understanding, and I might be wrong, is that circular economy is not usually in the capitalistic model of economy. We look at something is making money, and then there is this value chain where value increases, and at some point at the end of this chain, there is someone who earns money from it. And the circular economy model has the idea of bringing money back to the origin where this product started as well. So if we look at coffee, which would be one of the income drivers for the sanctuary, the people who grow the coffee earn the smallest amount, and the people who roast it and sell it earn the most. And so to look at how can we bring back value to and money back to the places where it originated, and how can we support the communities, how can we support the culture,
Mm-hmm.
because we want to get away from this model of the global north ruling over the south and kind of like having that
Yeah, it's kind of like unfair. I mean, if you look at it, yeah, I've always been a big proponent. But you look at if I lived in Japan, it's a capitalist country, but it's more socialistic in some ways, but not every way. But the other idea is like what you just mentioned is like if you're taking raw materials from Africa or Central America or from anywhere, Colombia, people don't get paid for the process, process materials, they get more money. And so the people who go and do the process, they suddenly clean up, and the person who was just going getting the raw material, they get nothing. My grandpa was a coal miner, so he kind of knew that. Like when they took the coal out the ground, he's getting like the lowest amount of the low, right?
yeah
And then once they take it and they process it and give it to the auto plant or they give it to the power plant, they were making way more money than the coal miners. Coal miners are like tied to the company store and they got them like on this revolving door and they had like constant debt.
yeah
It was like hard to get out of because it's the kind of way they wanted to run it. My grandpa finally he got out of it and started building houses because he took what he learned because they had to be a carpenter, an electrician, and a plumber in the mine. And he said, well, you know what? I can make more money doing that than being in the mine.
yeah
So it's like he took the skills he learned in the mine and said, forget the mine, I'm going to do this. And so, yeah, he's like, he kind of got out of it because he saw it wasn't going anywhere. They like kept on tying him to the company store, and they're like, "Whoa, that's a ripoff." But like, you must see the same kind of dynamic, and you're trying to fix it.
Yeah, so there is a great demand for money usually in those countries where a lot of the products are originating from, and there's just like so many different examples. But when we look at what could we do with a part of that money, we're not talking about all the money's going back, but at least a part of the money, so we pay higher wages so that the people can make a living from that and don't have to work 20 hours or having 3 different jobs. in order to provide a living. And then additionally, it is about strengthening the communities and the places where those people live, because it is about sharing, So a circular economy wants to create a win-win situation for everybody who's involved in that value chain, where the farmers, the maybe the shipping, everything is about more value, distributed value, but also about sustainability. At least to me, circular economy doesn't involve in that wording a sustainable aspect or a regenerative aspect. But for me, since we are dealing with quite some serious issues with in terms of climate change and other things of the pollution, so I feel like it should be our focus in order to create a future that is
more workable.
More workable for us as a species, as you mentioned, dealing with or not dealing, but kind of like being with nature rather than ruling over nature and making profits off of it.
Yeah, Calvinism versus like an indigenous belief in that Gaia is important and you don't hurt Gaia. But if you think you rule Gaia, you don't have that point of view. You're a Calvinist type of point of view. It's like, I can rule nature. And then what did you get? You got the fouling of all the rivers in Europe and the fouling of all the rivers in the United States when the capitalist industrial era, within 300, 400 years, you fouled all the rivers. That's a very positive thing, right? So he's like, that's not considering that nature is important. You thought that your profit was more important, so you didn't care. You threw the mercury in there, you threw all the other things in there, and now it's all over the whole planet. And they're like, oh, you didn't think about that? I guess not. But that's one of the things that really gets me going in terms of like the idea that we have this trickle down. Like, oh, if I let the top 1% have more wealth and I don't mandate that they need to pitch in for public works or anything going on, that they're somehow going to magically do that, right? It's like it doesn't happen. Like the fire department can't be made to be for profit, or everything will burn.
Yeah.
Right. So the idea that you don't have to ask them to help build the highways or fix the water, the utilities, or fix the treatment plants, because they'll just magically decide to do it. No, they don't. They buy super yachts, they buy Ferraris, they do all these other things. They don't do that. So sometimes you have to mandate that will be done, or they won't do it. The idea that they will go and do it is not true. We've been shown that they don't do it.
Yeah, and I totally agree. But I hope, at least in my utopian view of the future, that I sometimes perceive when I'm not totally depressed by the way everything's going, is that it is a process that has both angles. It is about being an example and being a role model for others, and to let them see and experience that pain. It is just, in my personal view, if you ask me, people who are able to just stand by and see what's happening are probably disconnected from their emotions and from their humanness, from their connection to the earth, right? And so by healing that, and the sanctuary, for me, it is at least a great opportunity to teach people to come back to themselves and to feel that it is important to take care of the planet, that it's our home, that it's our kind of like only place where we belong in that sense. It's not about going to Mars or other planets to find another planet to inhabit, but this is our home, so we better take good care of it.
Yeah, unless we start doing the whole idea, like, okay, we can go to Mars, we can go to the moon, we can go to asteroids, and we don't have to care about what we do here because we can just go somewhere else and build a dome. And then okay, fine. But I think, it's like, if you can heal people and make them understand that empathy is not weakness, right? That caring for your fellow man is not that you're being ripped off. Like, no, it's like the idea that you help somebody who's in a lower position is not something that's silly or it's weak. And it seems like today with certain types of individuals, there's a thought that, well, that's weak. There, if you aren't wealthy, that you're a criminal. Like that you're a bad person because you're not working hard enough. And the idea that you're kind of demonizing people who are less fortunate because you're not understanding structural systems
Yeah.
within the society, they're causing that to happen, and then you're blaming the victim, and that's not really very empathetic or very forward thinking for humanity. So I think anybody who does anything to try to change that mindset with what you're doing, or another way, political activists, what they do, I think that's very positive.
Yeah, and I think the important thing that you mentioned is the judgment in itself. There's so much judgment and so little empathy, and I feel that especially in a time where racism and fascism is on the rise again in Europe. I don't know how it is here. I just know that today there is this big Trump thing on TV because my auntie was watching that. But there is so much. There's such a great divide that it is important to come together, and to let go of that judgment and to be together in that, because I believe we can only solve the issues of the time when we come together, and we have a chance. If we don't use that chance, I just watched Don't Look Up yesterday, the movie with Leonardo DiCaprio, and I think it's a great movie because I was asking myself, what I don't get the movie, but I think I get the movie now, that it is about climate change, that the asteroid is being depicted as we could have done something really early, but we chose not to because of profit. And so at some point we miss the opportunity to do something about it, and then the Earth will continue, but humankind as we know it will probably not. And so it is what it is, but I see that we can come together and solve this, and it is an opportunity to grow,
Well, I think anything that's positive, that looks into humanity and tries to bring us together rather than separate us into different camps. And there's always been this kind of divide and conquer, that people who want to control things don't always have the best interest of the planet in mind. So if you have people who, like, we have things going on in the U.S. today, being an African American, we got people that want to go back to 1952 and actually prevent African Americans from voting, just because we don't vote for them. So they'll go and close our polls, so we can all have to go to one. Multiple counties have to go to one. Now, how is that right? Like, we're American citizens, but they want to act like, oh, because we don't vote for you, we're less of a citizen. And so that's the kind of mindset that's going on today, and people think it's okay. There's certain people who think that's fine because, oh, you guys are no good anyway. So there's very, very segmented things going on. It's like the most segmented I've seen since the 70s. I'm a child of the 70s. I'm 55 years old. I grew up with busing. I grew up with people yelling the N-word at me because they didn't want me in school. Now I look today, and my daughter, 22-year-old daughter, was walking down the street, and we get one of these MAGA people yelling the N-word at my daughter. So, they had the MAGA and the Trump flag. So it don't feel any different to me than when 72. Well, how is that? It's the 21st century. In 1972, somebody didn't like me going to school in a desegregated school. 2022, we got somebody with a MAGA hat on saying they're the N-word to my daughter.
Yeah.
So it doesn't look like they've progressed that much.
No.
So that's the problem. The people in the world need to understand that there is a problem in the USA right now. We've got a significant problem. And as an African American, I feel very confident saying it because I live it.
Yeah.
There are people that are not very empathetic and don't understand history. And they seem to be doomed to repeat the mistakes of 1864 and 65. That's what they seem to want to do. And that the world needs to understand how crazy these people could be. 1/6 was an example. If they keep on going that way, we could end up being very unstable in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you say is totally true, that the craziness of it just seems so obvious in my point of view, right? I'm not coming from here. I get to kind of like come from outside and look at it, and it seems like totally crazy to think that some behavior that has not served the nation maybe in the past is repeated. It's just like a dysfunctional relationship where I end the relationship with one partner and I begin the other one with the same
Codependency.
issues without looking inside and maybe seeing what is my part, what is my responsibility in this. So it is a
Well, it seems like
little.
we have a lot of codependency. There's a lot of people who are kind of stuck in that same abusive situation, and they keep on repeating it because, like, the problem is they people didn't learn the lesson. Dr. King, he left us. RFK, JFK left us, and then what do we got? Nixon, then we got Reagan, and now we got Trump. It's like, okay, where's the learning? There's no learning.
Yeah.
There's people want to go back before Kennedy. They want to go back before Dr. King. They want to go back before RFK. And they say, well, that's better. Really? It's like that's the problem. If you think about the timeline, it's like,
Yeah.
okay, we had Dr. King, we had RFK, we had JFK, and now you want to say, oh, those were bad. We got to go to before those guys. Yeah, it's like it's a kind of a mind numbing, but that there are people out there, that's what they think, and we as people who are more empathetic have to understand, like, everybody counts. Immigrants make our country. To go and use them as toys in a game, to try to say, oh, we don't like these people. We had governors shuffling people around as like pawns on a chessboard to point people, oh, these, and they were refugees, moving refugees around like pawns.
Yeah.
The point, a political point, that you're certain groups of people, oh, I don't like immigrants, so we can use them like chessboard game on the game and move them around. That's not being empathetic. That's not being forward thinking. This whole country was made on all these different people coming into a melting pot, but now they're acting like that's the bad thing. That's like the best thing about America. That's like the whole point of it, in my opinion. But I kind of went off.
No, that's okay. I feel just like it is easy to get carried away. It's just like I always try to go back to how can I improve the situation? How can I be the change that I want to see? And when you had been speaking, I just heard the inner voice. One of my teachers, Wayne Dyer, he said that inch by inch we're making progress. It doesn't look like it, but it's just like one small step after the other. It's getting there. So I don't know if it's enough time for the globe to transform in time, but in my point of view, I'm doing just the best I can, to connect with people and to give a hand out when I can, and to be compassionate. And if that might be like, from a certain point of view, that might sound like a very privileged point of view, where I haven't suffered some of the systemic problems that other people have. But at least this is my experience, and the experience that I had, I was my worst enemy in that sense, so I'm also more loving with myself, and through that I can be more loving with others, and do my best in helping, so that's all I can do.
I think this might be a good point to ask you this question. Like, if you were going to speak to your 25-year-old self, what advice would you have for him? Because, like, you kind of hinted at some things with your past, so maybe that's a good kind of segue to that question.
Yeah. So my 25-year-old, I would say, follow your heart, which is not the guarantee that everything's going to work out fine. There will be pain, there will be suffering, but it is the path that led me continuously to be who I am today. And I could have I could have started on that earlier if I wouldn't have looked at who is it I need to um, kind of like whose expectations do I need to fulfill, and to look outside for what people want from me. And rather than that, to just say, well, do what is your calling, don't hold back. I did a lot of the times, I did what I felt was my calling, but I always held back in being afraid of how others might perceive me, and maybe not fulfilling the expectations of my parents or friends or whoever. And so I feel that would be my advice to myself, to start on that path of personal fulfillment earlier, rather than to trying to achieve something first. I did wait until I was 30 to complete my college degree. And then I said, okay, when I'm 30, when I have checked that box, I can make music for 5 years, and I can give it all, instead of doing that from the get-go and say, well, music is my big passion. I'll just do it, So that as maybe a small example.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because a lot of people, like their parents, kind of make the goals for them, and you kind of have to step up and challenge your grandparents or parents or people around you. They have expectations, and like they put you on they put you on a law school track, but you don't want to be a lawyer. Well, if you want to be an artist, but that's not real, right?
Yeah.
Being a painter, how are you gonna make money?
Yeah.
So then they don't want you to do that. So then you feel like, okay, well, I'll go and do this because they want me to do it. But at the end of the day, when you get into your 30s, you're like, well, I never really wanted to do that. You say, looking in the looking glass, is like, that this is not the me. I don't want to be wearing the suit and tie. I don't want to be in corporate America in this glass tower.
Yeah.
I want to be in the art gallery. And my parents kind of forced me to this. And well, it's my fault. I shouldn't have listened to them. But there's a lot of pressure. Your parents, it's the ultimate peer pressure. I mean, it's more than peer pressure. It's like your parents are telling you this, and you got to do it. So, like, was that like the feeling that you couldn't get out from under that kind of expectation, that they were setting an expectation that was really hard to get out from under, or to kind of express a different
I
point?
think as I mentioned before, my inner judgment was probably, I don't think my parents ever said I couldn't drop out or do anything, So I felt like I have to do this because when I finished high school, I started as in police academy and canceled that after 2 years, kind of broke it off, and then went to the United States as an au pair, went back to Germany and started college. And when I looked at the interval of time that I already wasted, that is what my dad said, that he really said. But other than that, he had no judgments on that. He just said, you can't afford to waste any more time, So that sentence, in a sense, stuck with me, where I felt like, no, I can't drop out of college now, because then I don't have anything except my high school degree, right? So
Yeah.
it was more my inner judge that forbade me to stop and start making music. And I needed so much more time. I needed 6 years for a bachelor degree, made music all the time, didn't go to any classes. I could have, I could have done much more music when I would have decided to do it, So
Yeah.
in a sense, that's a good question, to just give it the full attention, don't hold back. That's my advice.
So, who was your the mentors? Who are the mentors that you looked to, the kind of role models that inspire you today? I mean, are they different than when you were 25, or are they the same?
They changed, from being music artists. I've always been looking up to musicians, to spiritual teachers, but basically they're the same. They live their passion. They went their way. They promoted their um the the the, things that they promoted. So early on, I talked to you about this in our pre-interview. Dave Grohl has been a huge influence for me because he's such a inspiring artist. He's just like a creative super machine who keeps on creating.
Yeah, and he
And
didn't get dissuaded by what happened. Because some musicians, something that tragic happens, they don't recover.
yeah,
and they can't find a way. And he created something that got bigger, and more sustainable than his original band. And there's a lot of purists. Oh, Nirvana's this, and I understand it. Like Nirvana is like looked at like the Beatles.
Yeah,
because they are. I mean, they're fantastic. But if they ever grow, what he's been able to do since then is dynamically amazing. And I do like really look to him because he came out of that sub pop scene. How many of those sub pop bands are around? They're not
Pearl
around.
Jam, maybe.
Pearl Jam, they were kind of like in their own world. But they survived. But Stone Temple Pilots and all the other bands kind of fell off. I mean, I love Soundgarden, but look what happened. That same kind of tragedy. But it seems like his drive. And I was like very enamored by Sound City, and like when he went and grabbed that Neve board out of that studio and then brought it to his house, because he's like, I'm gonna keep this thing going.
Yeah,
I thought that was awesome because he understood what it meant. What that board, and maybe people don't get it, but that soundboard was such a high quality thing, and it made things sound so amazing because of his analog nature and hand built nature, and he saved it from being destroyed and put it in his house, and it's actually being used on modern recordings. And to me, as a sound like a music historian, it's very critical to have core pieces of music legacy retained and kept alive. And I thought that was a really cool thing he did that maybe people don't understand, but that was a really important piece. He saved like a big music production piece of equipment and actually kept it going, and it kept it reconditioned and uses it to this day.
Yeah. And I think additionally, when we look at just at the music that flowed through that, it has in the Hawaiian concept of energy is mana. So there's so much energy that went through that. All these artists, all this creative juice went through that board, and so I share your
Nirvana went through that board.
Nirvana
went through it. Fleetwood Mac, like Tom Petty, all these bands went through that board, and it's like kind of like Moogs and stuff. It's like analog circuitry is kind of alive, and I try to tell people who are into digital, it's like it is something about it that has a lot of character, and it's like it's like the ghost in the machine, like that's why I'm so fan of Electric Ghost. It's like the electricity in my Moogs. I feel like they're members of my band.
Yeah,
when I'm playing with this old tech, it feels like I actually have a person playing with me. That it's not just some digital machine. It feels like there's somebody there, that there's something inside, like a spirit inside these machines. And that's why my band is called Phantom, because I feel like I'm playing with phantoms.
yeah, absolutely.
But I feel that. But yeah, they kind of go off. I still think that what we're talking about is it has synergy, because people say, "Oh, you're talking about two different things." They're like, not necessarily. But so one of the things that we wanted to get into is you had a statement that was interesting to me. Is like, if you can meet one person, dead or alive, who would it be? That you would. It was a question you wanted to be asked. So who do you find for that question? The answer to that question.
So what is my answer? I didn't hear the whole question.
Like there was a question like that you were ready to answer. It said, if you could meet one person, dead or alive, who would it be?
That is I love that question, but it's so difficult for me to answer, and it depends on the time of the day. Probably having talked with you all day about music, not all day, but maybe for the last hour, it would definitely be Bob Marley. But other than that, there's so many people I would love to meet, but Bob Marley is definitely, he's probably, I have this list of artists and bands I wanted to see, and I think the list is pretty much it's worked through. I've seen all the bands that kind of were around when I was when they were still around, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But Bob Marley is the only artist I will never and never got to see, you know. So I would say it's definitely him.
I would have loved to talk to Jimi Hendrix about
Mm-hmm.
the one thing I always wanted to talk to him about was like First Rays of the New Rising Sun, which was the album that was supposed to happen after Electric Lady. And I kind of built it over time from what I've read about what it should have been. And what I found was that it was a fantastic idea. And people, the thing that always got me up about Hendrix was people are trying to act like he was all washed up
Mm-hmm.
at the end, and he was working on that record. And if you actually find the tracks that were going to make up that record, it showed he wasn't washed up at all. He was going in this progressive rock, fusion, jazz, very like he was going like a direction like Yes and Pink Floyd. He was going
Mm-hmm.
in and it was like Weather Report. He was going in a different direction, like Zappa. He was going that way. He probably would have played with Zappa. I mean, that to me has always been this thing where I kind of hate the way he got tagged at the end, that he was all washed up, and everything you listen to, if you check all the old tapes, it's not the case. He was 27
Yes.
years old. He was just starting.
Yeah. So you would love to talk to him about that, about the
Yeah.
development of the.
Yeah, that's where he was headed because it
Yeah.
was unfinished, and I would have liked to see that full vision,
Yeah.
of where he thought he was going.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, probably that's just my point of view, but society has to discredit artists at some point because they cannot just say, well, here's this tragic story and this person had everything together in a sense, you know? So there needs to be some sort of stigma that it is added to the person so that people are afraid of following that path or something.
Follow the same
Yeah.
path. But
Yeah.
sometimes like if you're, the people who are at the, I guess they're like pioneers and they're at the edge. Like people used to say, well, Janis, Hendrix, and Morrison were all pushing it. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what happens when you push it. Like they were pushing it way beyond what you should push. And that it's like cautionary tale. But I always look at it as like, well, art, great artists are going to push it. Painters pushed it, actors pushed it. Sometimes in your craft, it's not all about living. It's about like, and maybe that's not cool. And maybe that's not a positive thing for you to stay around. But as an artist, sometimes that's the way it goes.
Yeah.
There's like a zenith thing. Maybe you shouldn't be like a method actor. Maybe you shouldn't go that extreme. Maybe you shouldn't be like a Morrison or Hendrix or Joplin, but we all benefit from their art, so you got to kind of like look at both sides of the coin.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to live long, is that the only thing, what the point of life is? Sometimes like it's like, you can make arguments about it, and people, I don't want people burning out if they don't need to burn out. But
I would assume that these artists lived the only way they knew how to, with their creativity, and they just lived, and it led them to something that is from a very centered point of view of society, maybe something that is not worth pursuing, but to them they were struggling. I would imagine when I look at my own life, I was struggling, and I had music that helped me express these feelings and this kind of like, and so it seems like these artists just expressed themselves and lived their way, the only way they knew how to, and their lives ended earlier than other people's lives who just go on cruise control through life doing something.
Yeah, I mean, it depends. I mean, if you're a creative person and you're kind of you're at this level where you're like exceptional, and you're living in a zone, and maybe you're overconfident, and maybe you take more risk than other people, so you tend to walk that kind of razor edge, and you don't consider like that anything could happen. And these people were all like in their 27s, they're 27. So yeah, there's a lot of bravado when you're young. You take risks. It's kind of the nature of young people. That's why insurance companies don't want to like rate you high.
Yeah.
Because you might. It's not only them. It's like young people tend to not think all the way through. Because you learn, and that those are extreme examples. But I think sometimes you have to look at people who are actually willing to make a choice, willing to make a decision. Like sometimes you sit there and say, well, I'm not going to do that because it's too scary, or I'm not going to put myself out in front of people. I'm not going to express myself. Yeah, there's always a danger when you actually open up and let the world see you. You can get hurt by it, and then it can affect you and make you go into something. And so, but I think it's better to let it out than to keep it in.
Absolutely.
That's my life lesson there.
Absolutely. And maybe as one quote from Wayne Dyer that I really love, he says, "Don't die with your music still in you, just let it out. Bring it into the world. That's bring your uniqueness, your sound, your voice, your whatever it is you came here, bring it and share it with everyone, and then don't regret not doing it. If I look back and imagine looking back, having lived my life and realizing there could have been, I could have sung, I could have brought my voice out, and I didn't. I choose not to. I choose to hide. Then that is a depressing thought for me. So I know I always gave it all, as much as I could at that time.
Well, I want everybody to thank you for being on the show today, and check out the Light Trails link there. It's going to be active when we publish. And I want everybody, anytime I have a podcast, I do encourage people to click the link that we are supporting. They are clickable once we publish. And this will be on the YouTube and all the other places we are on tonight, Twitter and Twitch. And we'll also be on Spotify video podcast and Apple Podcasts later tonight. And I thank you for being on the show. It was a great conversation. I think, we went off into a lot of different like zones, but that's kind of that's like life.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. It was a great pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Have a good rest of the day, because it's like still in the middle of the day for you. It's my evening time, but thank you, and aloha.
Aloha.
I don't know. I forgot the other thing I should say, but that's what I can say. It's a good night for everybody here on the East Coast, and we'll talk to everybody again. Thank you very much for watching Family of the Ghost, and we'll be out there talking to everybody again. Be safe out there. Thank you very much for being on the show.